Hello everyone, thanks you are watching my videos, and in that video I'm gonna to discuss a little bit about server-side rendering and about hydration. What is it and why it's important to know it. And as usual I'm gonna to break my video onto three main parts: the history of that video, the discussion by itself about server-side rendering, about the hydration, about its problems, and the last one I'm gonna to talk a little bit about the hydration in Angular based applications. Okay, let's start with the history. The history starts 3 years ago when I was considering which framework I can use in my platform as the main framework. My platform is like multifunctional platform to create front-end and back-end parts of the websites. It's kind of landing platform for many projects, and that's why it makes sense to determine the main framework which will be based framework for all of those applications. And it's a very conscious decision should be, and very important without any chance to change it in the future, because you may not have the chance having already couple of products created. And that's why I spent a lot of time thinking about it, and in that time I had two options. The first one is Vue.js and Angular. I don't want to talk why the rest I didn't consider, like React or something like that. It's a separate video, I think. But for now, let's discuss just only about Vue.js and Angular. And despite that Vue.js, as I remember, it was the third version, and at that point of time it didn't have compatibility with the native script, which I also would like to use in my platform to create the native based applications. And despite even on that, I've decided to proceed with Vue.js. There are also many other factors why Vue.js was really better, but I think again it will be a separate video. And the main also reason, kind of critical reason why eventually I've decided to proceed with Vue.js was the absence of hydration in Angular. Despite that I was really amazing, and I couldn't believe that Angular doesn't have that functionality. Angular had a really well promoted feature in G Universal, etc., but the absence of hydration. And this year, eventually, Angular announced the 16th version, which has the hydration. And I tried it, I tried that feature in the project. It looks fine, it works fine, and eventually decided to create video and explain why it was for me so frustrating and so important to have that feature in my project. And okay, let's start about the server-side rendering and about the hydration in general. I would like to start with the earliest 2010s and to look how the front-end development was like. And in that time was a time of such like frameworks like Flask, UE, Python-based, PHP-based. It was a time of simple static HTML pages hosted behind the Apache or Nginx and with small JavaScript files. It was also Django, WordPress, etc., some variations. But most common for some approaches of development was the approach of server rendering approach. That means that the backend was responsible to create and render kind of the web page. So all the blocks, the div blocks, the inputs had been created on the backend. And just only small parts of JavaScript logic was created just to bring extra functionality, extra interactivity to that page, to manage the click on the buttons, to manage the input fields, etc. And that approach had a really good benefits, at least couple of them I'm going to discuss right now. The first one benefit is, as far as you have ready to use kind of index.html file, kind of ready to use web page, and it's delivered to the browser, user can faster and can move faster and kind of immediately can start working with your page, consume the content and work with your page. And it's a better user experience. The second one benefit of such approach is a Google bot. Everyone who has a website knows how it's important to make your website popular, and it's greatly depend on the Google search engine, how it works, and Google bots particular, because Google bots, they are traversing the internet, they are enters your web server, receives the content and they are working with that content, parsing it, extracting the text and index them. And since the times they are available, like your page in the Google search, and it's very important the web page to contain as much as more as it's possible different texts, links, images, etc. to be indexed by the Google bot, and as fast as it's possible. And that's why that approach was really good. And also the role of front-end developers was a little bit low, because the great job was done by the backend guys to render the pages, to enrich it with div blocks, with the buttons, etc., with the database, with the data from database, etc. But since some time, community has paid attention that okay, there is a one bad practice with it, even not a practice, a bad user experience, because when user navigates from one page to another, it's the same like he leaves one website and he enters another website, because the new page should be loaded again kind of from scratch. Not new, maybe even the previous, but styles, JavaScript bundles, different, I don't know, fonts, images should be loaded again from the server to the browser, because it's new loading, it's new index.html file. But they paid attention that the footer and header can be still the same. That's why do we need to render again and to transfer the content from the server to the browser again if it's like the same, if it's already rendered? Maybe to think in different way, like to think about the layout, which contains at least three parts: the header, footer, and the core of the page. And when user navigates from one page to another, we will change just only the piece of the website which is response to the current route with a new one. We will send the request to the server, we will take the contents and replace it, and since the time the page will respond to the route user navigates to. And that idea, it was implemented in the frameworks like AngularJS, React, Vue.js, and others. And that was a pattern like single page application pattern. Because the benefit of that pattern was when user navigates from one page to another, it happens really fast, without any delay, without any gap in the loading. Everything really looks and works works organic. And also there is another problem related to the former approach, the server rendering. The problem was with the JavaScript code. Soon the website becomes more rich on the functionality. They grow, and the JavaScript grow as a consequence. It's incremented with a new logic, and in some time the JavaScript bundles and code was looked like a spaghetti code, and it had lack of kind of maintenance. It was difficult, a lack of organization. It was difficult to maintain and to fix anything and to extend that logic. And that also the place where the AngularJS and other frameworks helps to solve it, because the main principle how the such frameworks works is the next. There is a data structure, then there is a virtual DOM, and then there is a mechanism which is able to convert the virtual DOM. The virtual DOM by itself is the same data structure like the data structure which developers should work in terms of the framework, but the virtual DOM is enriched with some information, meta information, which is needed to render the real DOM. And the mechanism is responsible to convert the virtual DOM into its real DOM. And that's completely the common approach how the most frameworks, single page application frameworks does work. And that pattern tells us that since that time, the responsibility of creating the web page is moved from the backend to the front end. And since the time, the role of front end developers becomes grow, meaning that since the times the front end frameworks, the JavaScript frameworks, and the browser, they are responsible to create the real DOM, to create the web page. The server, since that time, sends to the browser the empty index.html file. Empty doesn't mean as it is. Empty means that it may not contain any content inside the body tag, and that content is generated on the browser, is created. And it was really too easy and to organize the code to work. It was like a champagne with an Angular JS, so easy to hide, to show elements. You can manipulate just data structure and don't take care about what's going on that pipe, how it will be converted to the real DOM. You just need to change the data and everything will be changed on your page. And it was shortly, we can tell that it's happened, the digitalization of the web page. Since the single page application has appeared, your website, it's already some data structure, just only the address on your data structure, the where on your data structure. So it has a lot of benefits, a good organization of the code, very fast navigation between pages, so it was like a new wave. But since some time it's happened that there is a problem. Community realized that the problem is related with the indexing of such websites, of such projects created with the help of Angular, JS and others. Since the web page which is returned, index.html page which is returned from the server to the browser, since it's empty, Google bots cannot retrieve the content from it because it's empty. And I know that some of you may tell me that nowadays Google bots, they are clever, they can execute JavaScript files, etc. But I don't believe in that in that idea. I will explain why. Because it's too expensive for them. Because Google bots will not wait until your website will have finished its loading of the JavaScript files, images, etc. It's communication like in next way. Googlebot says hi to your web server, takes the content of your page that should be indexed, read out by. So it's too fast because of electricity. If Googlebots will wait 5 seconds until your website will have finished, it will be really too expensive. That's why the problem to enrich the page, the initial page which is returned from the web server to the browser is raised, because at least for the Google bots. And that's the place where is the server-side rendering feature of the single page applications, of single page frameworks has born. That feature is supposed that as web server on the server there is a front-end web server which has under the hood the headless browser. What does mean headless browser? Headless browser is like the same browser but without any UI. So you can use it without any monitor. It can be in the form of binary file, may yes, may no. You can run, you can stop it, you can take the content to that headless browser. You can, like index.html file, it can load the scripts, can send the request, render the content, and then you can again return back the finished HTML page. So it's the same like it's done on the client side, on the user laptop. And since the time you can then send the ready to use content to the user and to the Google bot. And so looks like that feature has helped to solve that problem of the Google bots. But since the time it has happened the other problem. Okay, when the user receives the content which is ready to use, he can see, but he cannot interact because the page which he has received on the browser, it's like a static page, and that page has lack of interactivity. You cannot click and it will not work because its static page didn't pass all the flow of its creation through the pipeline of the framework, which is the base framework in the application. And that's why And has been raised that, okay, the question how to recover that interactivity, how to start that process to get that content in an organic way without recreation of the content because it's already existed. And that's where the hydration is coming. So the hydration by itself is like recovering of the interactivity of the web page to bring like listeners on the input fields, etc., to make it interactive as it would be using the pure normal organic flow of the framework, which like it's created from the scratch from the empty page on the browser side. And the iteration and deeply it's like a special mode of bootstrapping the front-end framework, meaning like I said, data structures and virtual DOM and then mechanism which converts the virtual DOM into its real DOM. And the iteration it's like a special mode of that mechanism which checks if its node is existing, if this node is existing in the DOM, so should I create or not. If it's the same to what I gonna to create, so I can just take the reference to that node and continue further execution, but do not recreate new one and replace with this with the new. So that's the principle how the iteration works. So it's at the moment in the place of decision to create or to reuse the existing, that the iteration is happening in general in the source code. And that's what Angular didn't have 3 years ago. Completely what how Angular did it. Angular implemented the rendering of the static pages. They are delivered to the browser. But once Angular starts its bootstrapping, it creates the data structure, virtual DOM, and then it starts the mechanism. And that mechanism didn't have the iteration, meaning that it just simply removes the existing node and with a new one from the virtual DOM. And the problems like a flickering has happened. Like your content, it leads to the situation when the user can see content and then in a second or faster or later it disappeared and appeared again, like a flickering. And also it had a problem with iframes because you may see the iframe is already started its loading, but once since it's already replaced with a newly created node, it starts loading again. And you can see it started and then again it started loading. So and you cannot find any workarounds for that. That was a really problem. But nowadays I think that problem is already solved. Not I think, I've tried and that really works fine, at least in Angular. And I just want to, I think that's it what's related to the server-side rendering and iteration by itself. So that approach, like the iteration and server-side rendering feature, has moved again back the functionality of rendering the static pages from the browser to the server back. And since the time, the backend again is responsible to render but it's controversial question. Backend meaning from the uh, functional kind of point of view. In general, it's still the JavaScript code, it's JavaScript framework, but it's happening on the server, and it's moved to the server side again, but in different forms already than it was 10 years or more ago. Okay, just couple of words about the experience of working with the iteration in Angular. Really, it works fine, as I said a couple of times even, sorry. What I want to add extra, be careful with the set timeouts because iteration in Angular works in next way. The iteration initial logic is subscribed to the application ref is ready or is stable, I don't remember exactly subject. The subject sends the event which kind of which is even from the zone.js stable event. meaning that when Zone.js is stable, the stable means that Zone.js doesn't have any micro task like set timeout or set interval in the queue. If it doesn't have, it sends that is stable, like it tells to Angular I'm stable. So I don't have anything in queue, that means everything is finished, it's loading, etc. So I'm in stable, and since the application receives the is stable event, it sends that event uh, deeper to its own services, and the iteration the one which is listening for that event, and it starts. And the problem is that it waits, the iteration initialization logic is waiting 10 seconds for that event. If it's not received, so the iteration will not start, and it raises an error. Not an error which breaks an application, just it raises an error, I didn't start, and that's it. And that may happen because you may have in your constructor for services, for modules, for components in the constructor the set timeout or set interval for pollers, for everything, anything like that. And if you have that, so it may break the is stable event in Zone.js will not fire, and as a consequence the iteration will not start. So when you will see that, just carefully check all your set timeouts. In my case it was really difficult, and I was needed even to dump and to debug the Zone.js completely source code, and catch what was exactly the reason, the Zone.js is not stable, what's breaking that logic. And the second one, what I want to tell about the iteration in Angular, it's like I said again, the data structure, virtual DOM, mechanism of conversion, and the decision when Angular will replace with the newly created or reuse the existing node, and that relies on the comparison between the existing and the projected node. If they are the same, it will be reusing, and Angular in that case just checks only the comparison by tag name. That's it, and I think that's really important, and that's really fine. Even if you have not consistent the class names in the real DOM and as existing node and in the virtual DOM, doesn't make sense. Iteration will happen still, and it will replace, because Angular implemented that they like solve the main problem. Do not recreate the nodes. The class names can be overridden, attribute names, values can be overridden, but the node by itself shouldn't be recreated. For example, in Vue.js, the logic of such comparison is different. I may be wrong, but what I remember, because it was 2 years ago, I investigated it. And as I remember, Vue.js does the comparison of string value of existing node and string value of the node from the virtual DOM, meaning that if it has the different class names, spaces, or other things, that may break that comparison, and that's really bad, because all the available and existing, all the hierarchy will be replaced and replaced with a new one. So, okay, so I think that's it what I wanted to tell you about the server-side rendering and iteration. I hope that may help you to create better application with a better user experience. So thank you, bye.